Hey, let's go ahead and get into our conversation, DC, in regards to what we're going to talk about, and then we'll make sure we catch up at the end on Miss Baker coming back out of the next break. I'll get that fixed in studio. So, all right, DC, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what Nick Saban, what a job he's done here. But the question becomes, what's the driving force in your opinion? I asked this question as we were going to break. What's the driving force behind Nick Saban's success in recruiting and the players coming here? Is it his? Is it him? Is it championships? Is it the jerseys? The NFL? What do you think the driving force is?
Well, I think it's a combination of all those, because you got to have, there wasn't a him until he established winning here, following the process, leading to success, and then that success leading to success on the next level in NFL. All those building blocks. So I think it all goes back to Nick Saban. When Nick Saban came here, he raised the level of recruiting, raised the level of play, the level of success, a level of championships at Alabama, and with that's raised the level for the talent level, and that raised the level of Alabama putting in players in the NFL. So it's kind of like a domino effect. But I think Nick Saban is the driving force. It's him as coach. It's his ability to recruit. It's his process. And for all the young kids out there to be able to see the number of championships he's been able to win, and the number of players in the NFL that from Alabama recently, within the last 10 years, that are actually playing, competing, and then, as you've seen this past year, cashing some big checks after that first 4 years in the NFL. So, I mean, it's a draw for young men to see that. I mean, you follow them on Twitter, you hear what they're saying these days, and one of the guys said, "Hey, it was Nick Saban. Why would I want to go anywhere else when he laid out all those ratings? That's what I want. I want a championship. Why would I want to go anywhere else?" So I'm saying, hey, he's putting all the defensive backs in the NFL. That's my position. Why would I want to go anywhere else? So I think it's a combination of all those factors.
All right, and so let's kind of break down each one of those a little bit, because I think that as good as all of those are, does it potentially have any negative? Because when you listen to it on the surface, it seemed like it would actually be a win-win, but does it have the potential, and did we see a little bit of the potential negative side of what happened what happens when this becomes the recipe for winning? But let me read a story to you about you talking about Nick Saban and kind of combining all of those things together. At their most recent opening, they had an opportunity to talk to a 4-star Georgia defensive tackle commit who tried to flip. Nick Saban tried to flip when he was here on the visit. Listen to what Nick Saban said to him. The young man said, Stackhouse said, "We actually had a great time at the meeting. Me and Jamil actually got individual talks with Nick Saban. I'm pretty sure Nick Saban gave both of us the same speech. He's like, if you come here, you're given an opportunity." He was like, "Would you rather go for the 20% table or the 50% table?" And what he means by that is, would you rather get a 50% chance of going to the NFL or a 20% chance of going to the NFL? Nick Saban literally the boldness of that statement, that if you come here, and I'm sure he doesn't tell every kid this, but as a 4 or 5 star, Nick Saban's touting a statistic, James and DC, that half of the guys who come here and stay and go through the process are getting a chance to move on to the next level.
Yeah, I think that's amazing statistic when you look at it. But when you can use those type of statistics, you have to. It has to be true, and that's what's going on in the NFL these days. I mean, I was looking at some articles yesterday of players that the NFL guys. These are guys that are NFL writers, and I just glazed into a couple of articles, and one of them listed the top 10 emerging players. 40% of them were Alabama players. That's 4 out of 10. And then they had 2 honorable mentions, which raised the level to close to 50%, a little over 50% when you look at those. Then there's another article that listed 3 other Alabama players that weren't listed in that article. So we're talking about out of 15 or so players, 16 or so players, NFL writers talking about players who are emerging in the NFL. Pick out about 6 or 7 Alabama players in that. So, the statistics doesn't lie, and the kids can see that. And I think it's okay for Nick Saban to point that out to them.
Yeah, and what we'll do, DC, is I want to come back to those articles you just mentioned and kind of talk through some of the names on that list and get to that, because Nick Saban has done something in the last 3 years that I don't know if it'll ever be matched, and yet he sits in a position where he may have one of his most talented teams, meaning he sent 30-plus players, 10 or more players the last 3 consecutive years to the NFL, but yet this team is loaded with preseason All-Americans as well as possibly 5, 6, 7 first-rounders, day 1, day 2 type of guys, maybe as high as 10 on this particular team. But going back to one more thing about this recruiting, and this is the question I have, DC. It's great that we have the guys going to the NFL. It's great that we have guys going to the championship game. I mean, we're winning championships, and we have the Nick Saban factor. But I have a concern sometimes with this approach, and I'm not sure it didn't show up some down the stretch, as I heard some of the rumors of what people were fighting about, fussing about, etc. in the locker room about players getting. There was some jealousy amongst Quentin Williams getting a lot of love because he was getting all the hype. And Raekwon Davis wasn't, and Isaiah Buggs wasn't, and some of the other defensive players, because they weren't getting the NFL love. And do they play when there's nothing on the line? Think about the last time Alabama wasn't in contention for a season-ending championship. And we saw what happened in that Clemson game. Did some of those guys potentially quit because they saw that it wasn't going to be a win? And that's the difference in playing for NFL championships and playing for the Crimson jersey.
Well, I think it's always going to be a negative recruiting tactic. That's what some people are going to say about Alabama. I'm not so sure that was the reason. I understand where you're coming from there. My take on it would be that last year's team there was a couple or 3 or 4 players on the team who were putting themselves in front of the team. It may have been a little bit of that jealousy, that sort of thing, but it could have just been the makeup of those players and who is in their camp, in their ear. And you know how that can go for a young man, everybody in their ear. And a lot of those people don't have the players' best interest at heart. They're looking out for themselves as well. So I kind of think that kind of crept in last year. Overall, though, there's a couple of other things that could be negative recruiting. That's one of them, what you've mentioned. But another is we see players decommit or leave or not want to come here because people telling them, hey, well, why would you want to go over there if you're a wide receiver? They got 4 to be picked in the NFL right now. You want to compete against that. And that gets young people thinking about, hey, me not be able to go and start on the first team or get start first year. And that's a negative recruiting tool that people use. And that's something that happens when you have success and you have great players. But you want to recruit for players that want to come in and compete. And I think that's what Nick Saban has been able to do. And that's why he's been so successful.
And I agree with that. I think it's definitely used negatively. As a former player, my biggest concern is that they don't, and I'm not saying they don't grow to love Alabama. My concern is what's going to happen with this team when there's not a championship to play for and it's just about them getting to the NFL. If this team loses 1 or 2 games early, I don't want to see that happen. But when that happens, it's going to be interesting to see how Nick Saban and this coaching staff handles this team or his team, because he's not had to face that in a long, long time. And, there's a difference in coming to play for Alabama and coming to play through Alabama on your way to the NFL. And I think we have a lot of guys that's really what Alabama represents, is that ticket to the NFL. And I have no problem with it because it's given us a lot of great memories as fans. But I just wonder if we hit one of those speed bumps, will we see an Alabama team absolutely fall apart because they don't play for the jersey, they play for championships in the NFL?
That's very potential. There's potential for that, but I think this year's schedule is a great schedule for us to ease into and not have that happen. So
I agree with you.
I think Alabama's fortunate they hadn't had to deal with that. And that's like talking about most teams deal with that. There's only a couple of teams every year that get to play for the championship. So
that's right.
Alabama has been in a position not to have to deal with that for quite some time now. And I don't know how we'll react if we were to have to do that. I hope to think that we get back to this Alabama factor. That won't be a problem. And I believe if he's gotten rid of some of the coaches and some of the players that were a problem, I think you'll see us moving back more to the Saban-esque process, Alabama factor type stuff this year.
And I agree with the DC. That's DC Capstone Report. I hope that the Bama factor is enough to get there. We're gonna have Gregory come back with us on the other side, and he has a question for you, DC, about Lane Kiffin. And earlier I mentioned that Lane Kiffin may have been the slow bleed that led to what we saw last year that didn't appear to be that Bama factor team, that MTAQ that Nick Saban said he wanted to make people quit. Did Lane Kiffin start that slow bleed? And has Nick Saban done enough in this offseason to get us back to that place where that's no longer a factor? We'll have that conversation along with that article you mentioned about emerging Alabama players and more as we continue our conversation with DC Capstone Report. DC Capstone Report. Sorry, we had a momentary silence. I'm not sure if it went out over the airwaves on silent, but it totally went silent in the studio. It probably DC because we probably weren't supposed to mess with Karen Baker Cottingham on her 75th. I mean, on her 50th birthday. And so I guess that's probably what happened. It was just totally silent in the studio, and they were like, "We can't hear anything." So I apologize for those of you listening on the radio if that threw you off. But I think we're back good on both sides. James did a great job getting us back up and going. But DC, before we bring in Gregory, you did have something you wanted to say to Miss Karen Baker Cottingham.
Yes, my beautiful wife, Karen Baker Cottingham, as you said, turns happy birthday day to her. She turns 50 today. And all your listeners, check out on Facebook. Check out my Facebook page. There's billboards around Tuscaloosa announcing her 50th birthday. I went all out for her this year. If you get a chance just to wish her happy birthday, I would appreciate it. She's the love of my life. And she's the last one in our family to turn 50. So we told her we're going to get her really good this year.
Did you just say that you have not a billboard? Did you put an S on that? Billboards around town?
Oh yeah, if you're in downtown Tuscaloosa going over the Hugh Thomas Bridge into North Fork, there'll be a digital billboard there. And if you're at Midtown Village on the highway McFarland Boulevard, there's a billboard there you can take a look at. And not just one day. I went ahead and got them for 3 days, so everybody in Tuscaloosa would know it's my beautiful wife's 50th birthday.
DC, it has been great having you a part of the program. We appreciate you so much. And I guess everybody's going to need to listen to DC Capstone Archives because you're not going to be doing anything. She's going to kill you, DC. She's really a great. I'm sure she's a great sport. She's a great sport about it. I really hope she is because. And by the way, did you tell everybody take a picture and post it? Right.
Yeah, right. If you see a billboard, take a picture and tag her on Facebook. Karen Baker Cottingham on Facebook. Just tag her on Facebook so she'll know that you've seen a picture of her billboard.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, happy birthday, Miss Karen. Thank you for all that you do to help us at Harvest Church. You do a great job, and happy 50th birthday. So, and she's already told me it's going to hurt really bad payback because I have one coming up. Let's get to Gregory real quick, DC. And then we'll get back on that other conversation. DC, Gregory, thanks for your patience. You're in with DC.
Hey, roll tide, DC. Hey,
roll tide,
number one, I'd like to wish your wife a happy birthday, man. And I'd like to say you knocked it out the park with that. With that billboard thing. Man, that's some creative stuff right there.
3 days, Gregory.
I know.
He got 2 billboards for 3 days.
Man, he touched my heart when he did that. That's something I'll do.
Thank you, Gregory. I tried to do good on this.
Man, that'll thumb up, man. But let me give Lane talk about Lane Kiffin, you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I think Lane Kiffin, y'all, the greatest offensive coordinator I ever seen, mind-wise. You know what I'm saying? Because every time we had a weakness, he always adjusts.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Now, I understand what Martin was saying about counsel. Out the field, okay, I agree with his with the things he was doing. But on the field, this man was so creative. He the only one, Martin. You asked me one time, you said, would you face Nick Saban with the team he got? Yeah. In my heart, I'm a competitor. Now, you asked me who I face Lane Kiffin, Kirby Smart, I have said, I had to think about it. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cause with Lane, with Kiffin, he the most creative type of coach. You know, I take my hat off to. I wish we had him this season because one thing I do know about Lane Kiffin and DC, I want to know your opinion about him. If we show too many weakness during this season, in the playoff, we'll come back and hurt us. And I'll be quiet and listen.
Well, Greg, you make some great points about Lane Kiffin. Nobody can argue with Lane Kiffin's offensive acumen. I mean, he's one of the best offensive minds there is out there. My only comment about that would be this, Gregory. I think Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban just not match their style.
Right.
I think they were oil and water. Anytime you have that on a team, there's kind of like a players who love Lane Kiffin's loosey-goosey style, if you will, and showboat style. Mm-hmm. And you got those others that are honed into the process. It became like Martin said, it became just a growing problem. And I think, to be honest with you, we saw that play out in the national championship game. I blame the national championship loss on Lane Kiffin, and only because of this. If you see Steve Sarkisian in the first half, it is the type of coordinator you want Steve Sarkisian to be, and that is running the ball. He had a game plan. And up until the point that our running back got hurt, both got hurt, I think we were winning that with that philosophy. And when he got hurt, Greg, the only thing they had to fall back on was everything they had learned under Lane Kiffin, and it just didn't translate. I think you got to have Lane Kiffin at the helm to call those plays, run those plays, that great offensive mind that you're talking about there. So I just think that's the only knock on him. Him and Nick Saban didn't translate. He's a great guy, probably a great coach when he can run his own team like he did at Far Atlantic. I think he'll make some good decisions. But I don't think it's meshed.
DC, we're gonna be playing against him. He's gonna be at Auburn after they fire Gus.
Oh, man,
get on. Get, man, no, man.
I'm telling you, Lane Kiffin is going to Auburn when they get rid of Gus.
Well, if he does,
he do. I'm putting it like this here. I hope you're saying it for a joke, Mark.
I'm not saying it for a joke. I'm serious. I mean,
if he does, he'll make for some great games down the stretch.
Who would you, if you got rid of Gus Malzahn right now, who would you go after?
But see,
you have an offensive-led team at Auburn. You have an offensive-led team. You have Bo Nix as a rising superstar, and you've seen, and you have Gatewood. You've seen that no matter what style quarterback you have, Kiffin has the ability to make them really good. Whether it be a Jalen Hurts, whether it be Blake Sims, or whether it be Jake Coker, he can coach him. So if I'm Auburn, I'm looking at, if I can deal with the craziness of Lane Kiffin, why wouldn't you give him a chance?
Hello. Oh man, you just said it then, Mark. You remember when he was at Tennessee and we played against him? Yeah. He almost made Nick Saban pull his hair out of his head.
Yeah.
Cause them plays he called was incredible.
Yeah,
y'all go back and look at that game.
All right, Gregory. Thanks, man. Great point. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
All right, DC. Hey, DC, let's go ahead and get a break so we can have a little more time on this last break. Talk about a couple things. I want you to talk about that article, Nick Saban, what he's done in terms of getting players to the league and the impact that Alabama football player. If players are choosing Alabama because of the NFL, they're about to give even more high school kids reasons to believe that their dream can come true as well. We'll talk about that article and more right here on the Blitz. Up next, DC, give us an update on what's coming up next. I believe that there's finally breaking news. DC is coming out of hibernation. DC Capstone Report is on the verge of returning.
That's right. We've been on the hiatus for the summer, but this week we'll be posting up our first podcast of the year. Just a general preview of Alabama football coming out of the summer workouts, heading into media days, and then next week we'll be looking at a review of the media days and what we learned from it. So glad to be back at Lance. Is doing a great job. I've been working with videos and things, putting up on our site in the absence, but then we'll be coming up with these podcasts, hopefully give you some insight into Alabama football heading into the opening game of the season.
All right, DC, there's an article Bleacher Report put out talking about the top players to look at from emerging positions. They listed about 10 guys, 10 different positions, and 4 of those guys were Alabama guys. And as you mentioned, there's also an article that I saw where one of the guys not mentioned in this article is expected to have a breakout season for the Miami Dolphins, talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. So quite a few Alabama guys looking to make some noise. But let's talk about this. The 4 guys that were mentioned. Let's start with the tight end first, O.J. Howard. What are you expecting to see from O.J. Howard as he gets more settled in as a tight end at Tampa Bay?
Well, I think O.J. Howard's got a really high upside this year. I mean, he's had an opportunity to learn the NFL, learn the coverages. He has great raw athletic ability that's even gotten better. So I think he is really poised to have a breakout season for Tampa Bay. Getting in the ball is going to be, I think, critical this year. He is probably going to be one of the most amazing tight ends in the league this year. If you're doing a fantasy football league, he'd be somebody I'd want to draft. So, and I think also when you have a tight end, you need to have a quarterback that sees the value in that. And I think what I've heard coming out of the summer OTAs, the camps, have been nothing but glowing reports of the rapport they have together there with Winston, and he's even made some comments about how much of an improvement O.J. Howard's made. So.
Yeah, and you hope that Winston keeps his head straight, because if he does, the guy is a talent, and you hope that OJ's career is supported by that talent and not by the craziness that he does off the field. The next guy up, a guy probably that a lot of people we won't remember, we don't watch, we don't see because they don't get that much love, but he was a shocker on draft night, and he has not disappointed in what he's been able to do. And I think he's finally going to have his quarterback back healthy, and that's Ryan Kelly, a center for the Colts.
Yeah, I think Ryan Kelly, barring some injuries that he had last year, would have had a breakout year last year. He was poised going into first several games. And really, Indianapolis quietly has put together quite a good offensive line. I think they saw the value in that, trying to protect Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck having so many injury problems, but I think with Luck finally back, with the offensive line around him, I believe Ryan Kelly is the cog to make that offensive line work. If he can stay healthy this year, I look for a lot of good production out of him and that offensive line protecting Andrew Luck this year.
Yeah, that center position is one that gets overlooked till it can't be overlooked. But you look at a lot of the great quarterbacks from Terry Bradshaw and Webster up to the guys that Peyton played with up until now. Most of the time, there's a great center in the middle of that offensive line that helps those great quarterbacks stay up on their feet. Another guy in the middle that's going to try to make sure that Ryan Kelly and others like him don't have as much success, expecting a breakout year from Jonathan Allen. What are your thoughts with him and the Redskins?
Yeah, those Alabama team of the North there. I tell you, Jonathan Allen, you could pick several Alabama players on this team. Deron Payne, you could pick Ryan Anderson. They're all, now Landon Collins could have breakout years, but I think Jonathan Allen is really, really, really set to have his best year ever this year. He is a great talent, great athletic ability. He has his head on straight. I don't know if you've ever listened to him talk. He has a really great intelligence, and it takes intelligence in the NFL to go against some of those schemes that you talked about that they put against out there from a good center perspective and good blocking schemes. And I think Jonathan Allen could be the big year for him this year to make a lot of noise in the NFL. And I think he's got himself in a position to just reach stardom, and this year could be his year.
And the last person that made that list, that Bleacher Report list, as breakout players by position was Rashaan Evans of the Titans. A guy who I think never, to me, as good as he was here, I don't think we ever saw his full athletic capability showcased at Alabama.
No, I don't think we could see it because of the injuries that he played through. And he played through some horrific, some horrible, painful injuries at Alabama that most people don't even realize how much he played through. But I think he's finally healthy. Everything I'm hearing out of Tennessee from the coaches, from the head coach all the way down to defensive coaches, is that he has brought to the off-season workouts his leadership ability. He's stepping up with his just leading by example, and looking for him to have a huge year for the Tennessee Titans. So this may be his best tackles, number of tackles, and making disruptions in the running game and passing game. So I think opposing teams are going to really have to watch for Rashaan Evans this year.
And if you
also go back to Jonathan Allen's article, read down at the bottom, they always talk about 3 honorable mentions or other players they could have picked. And Jaron Reed is picked in there as another emerging breakout year for the Seattle Seahawks. And so, Alabama's got 5 players listed right there. And that's just one article. There's been several other articles that's listed people like Eddie Jackson, Minka Fitzpatrick, Kenyon Drake as having breakout years this year. So, when you talking about that, that's a lot of Alabama players talking about having breakout years that we get put in the NFL in the last couple of years.
And if you were making this list, what's the one name that's not on this list put on this list?
Well, if I was making that list, the one name that I would add to it would have to be from the Washington Redskins, and I think Ryan Anderson is poised to have a great year. I've heard a lot of players talk about Jonathan Allen, and they talked about Deron Payne, they talked about Landon Collins coming over there. But everybody that's talked about them in the same conversation, they brought up the improvement that Ryan Anderson's made. So I'm looking to see him have a good year this year for the Washington Redskins.
All right, that's DC Capstone Report. That he's going to be back up live starting next week. You can find him at dccapstonereport.com, dccapstonereport.com. DC, I'll toss it back to you. I want to remind you, be careful how much food you eat. Check it for soy. Because you know what soy does to you, and since you've put your wife on billboards for multiple days celebrating her 50th birthday, you need to be careful what you eat. I don't think she's gonna put you down, but she might swell you up a little bit. So watch out for the soy.
I would say this: all of this new podcast coming back and all me being on the show next week is all contingent on me making it through the day. So we hope I make it through.
Yeah, I hope you make it through the day. But seriously, wish you love one more happy birthday.
That's right. Happy birthday to Karen Baker Cottingham. Another happy 50th birthday to her. And thanks, Martin, for letting me do this on your show. I appreciate every morning the opportunities I have on your show each week. And looking forward to another great year of the DC Capstone Report.
All right. That's DC Capstone Report, weekly guest every Tuesday, rolling things back out at DC Capstone Report. Thanks, DC. Have a great day.
Thanks, Martin, and roll tide.